Hi, and thank you for tuning in today. My name's Seth Gerson, Program Director for K-12 Education here at the National Governors Association, and welcome to NGA's webinar, spotlighting Missouri's efforts to strengthen education for students, families, and schools across the state. Today, I'm honored to engage in a conversation with Jamie Birch, Director of Policy for Governor Mike Parson, and Dr. Margie Vandeven, Commissioner of Education for the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Both are going to provide insights on how they've worked together to advance education policies and priorities in Missouri. Before serving in her current role, Jamie served as the governor's deputy policy director and senior policy advisor. Prior to joining the governor's office, Jamie served as the legislative director for the Missouri Public Service Commission. She's also has past experience working as a policy advisor for former Arizona Governor Janice Brewer. Commissioner Vandeven has served in the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education for more than 19 years and as commissioner for more than 7 years, from 2015 to 2017 and since 2019. Dr. Vandeven announced her retirement last year as Commissioner of Education, effective July 1st of this year. Prior to joining the department, the commissioner was a high school English teacher and district administrator in Maryland and Missouri. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining us. And Commissioner, thank you for your longtime service and leadership on behalf of students, educators, and schools in Missouri. Jamie, why don't we start with you? How have you worked together to move forward Missouri's efforts over the past number of years? What were the keys to doing so effectively?
Thank you, Seth. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I would highlight just having open lines of communication. Commissioner Vandeven and I have often texted, called, emailed multiple times a week without fail. So just having that ability to pick up the phone and kind of have that relationship to tap into one another, lean on one another as things come up, whether that's being a sounding board, running ideas off by one another, and just making sure that we're basically on the same page and prepared for what's coming down the pike. The other thing that comes to mind for me is that we were always in lockstep in terms of priorities and a shared vision for the state for education.
All work together with education and being able to move forward. And also what you said about, how education fit into the overall agenda that the governor has been promoting across the state on workforce development. Jamie, want to go to you on, we saw that one of the governor's longstanding priorities came to bear fruit this past legislative session on teacher pay. What was the catalyst for action in that area? How did you engage state and local leaders in moving those efforts forward?
Yeah, this one is actually one where we took perhaps our cues from the State Board of Education and from the leadership of Commissioner Vandeven. They really laid a really strong foundation for the governor's leadership on this. I think this is a really good example, a case in point for while we both had a shared priority of elevating the workforce of teachers and educators, Commissioner Vandeven and the State Board of Education really laid a nice foundation for us to be able to do that. And specifically, the state board created a commission, a blue ribbon commission on teacher workforce and retention. And Commissioner Vandeven was kind enough to include me in that effort and get that buy-in from the governor's office from the get-go. So being at the table with members of the State Board of Education and business leaders and teachers from across the state really solidified kind of the lockstep movement between the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and our office. And that also gave us an opportunity to engage, as you mentioned, the state and local leaders around that topic. So I think that was excellent foresight by the State Board of Education and Commissioner Vandeven that really enabled us to be able to take that action this past session.
That's great. Thanks, Jamie. So really using that commission as a driver for being able to include a lot of different voices, and that provided that catalyst for moving forward. And I'll just say to our our viewers will certainly include any materials from that Blue Ribbon Commission, because it's always a good model for bringing together different stakeholders to be able to take action in an important area. Commissioner, I know that's a longstanding priority of yours, educator recruitment and retention. We've had you come speak to governor's advisors on that in the past, and always a good conversation. Can you talk a little bit about not only the teacher pay work, but overall your efforts over the last number of years to move forward the conversation on educator recruitment and retention?
Sure, Seth, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that. And thanks, Jamie, for tying in the Blue Ribbon Commission work. It has been a longstanding issue here. We have been addressing it at the State Department for quite some time. But as Jamie pointed out, getting those business leaders at the table for the business for the Blue Ribbon Commission was really, really key. And how we tried to frame this was around, again, workforce development. If our teachers are the workforce that creates all other workforces, then we really need to make sure we have great teachers in the classroom, right? Because the research is expressly clear that the number one school level factor, all kinds of external factors, but the number one school level factor that's going to impact student performance is that highly trained, highly skilled teacher right there in the classroom. So making sure that we have an effective teacher for every student became a huge priority for us. And I will say that it was at this year's, well, a year ago now, but at the State of the State, when the governor mentioned, or not mentioned, but he really elevated this topic again, and both sides of the aisle were standing in applause. I'm like, it's going to happen this year on teacher. I mean, it was just one of those things, but it takes multiple years of planting the seed. I mean, the governor came to our administrators conference, I think his first one, and talked about, we have to come up with some solutions on this work. And so we all came together on this. But during that Blue Ribbon Commission, we also had teachers who were present and talked about salary certainly being part of the issue. And we're really happy to see movement there. But it's not the only part of the issue, right? It's not the only part of what's wanting to keep our teachers in the classroom. And so some of the things that we really did was focus on two issues, the recruitment and then also the retention. We do know that a number of our teachers were leaving within the first 5 years, and that's a challenge for any profession. So the things like on the recruitment side, the salary part will help with that. The grow your own programming that we are seeing, again, if you look in our state, and I don't think it's unlike many states, go look at your teachers and see how far where they grew up. And it's really often relatively close to that school. And so finding our best and our brightest students in, 7th, 8th grade, and then looking in high school, how you can set up some of these pathways for success for them has been really, we're seeing lots of return on that. Lots of investment in the Grow Your Own programming, working closely with our educator preparation programs and others to do that. But also then talking about on the retention side, again, elevating teacher voice. How do we keep them in the classroom and be able to help them become teacher leaders without needing to go into administration? Not that we don't want them to go into administration, but you don't want all of your great teachers to have to leave the classroom, because we need them in the classroom. So how do we elevate teacher voice? I had a teacher advisory committee that I've leaned heavily on. So making sure they're part of this policy discussion, talking about how do we work in partnership with parents? That is another really, really big thing. And the career ladder is something that helped in giving and elevating teachers who are currently in the profession, so that they didn't feel like the only way they could receive additional payment was to go into administration. That's how those two tie in together there. But anyway, lots of different layers to this. It's what we say is, it's a complex issue. It's complicated on the one hand, but it's also quite complex. And so really digging into it across the board has been helpful for us. And we're seeing some great strides there.
Thanks, Commissioner. And I really appreciate how you're talking about not only the recruitment side through Grow Your Own programs, but also retention through the Career Ladder program and really harnessing some of that educator voice to make sure that there's engaged in the development and implementation of that work so it has sustainability. Thanks so much for sharing that. Jamie, want to go back to you. I know another priority area for the governor has been around early learning and childcare. Can you tell about some of the efforts in this area and how you've worked with the commissioner to advance this work?
Yeah, very happy to. This is probably one of the most exciting projects that I think our administration has worked on personally. Huge impacts for generations to come, we believe. So I think most importantly, we have expanded access to pre-K, specifically for children who are eligible for free and reduced lunch. We have opened that up to all children that are eligible for free and reduced price lunch in their year before kindergarten. So very, very excited about that. And that was something that Commissioner Vandeven and the State Board of Education put their whole weight behind, and were incredibly supportive in moving that forward. In terms of childcare specifically, we also kind of a keystone of our administration was actually creating an office of early childhood, which includes childcare, which is my understanding is still somewhat uncommon across the country, to have all early childhood programs and services consolidated under one agency. So we're pretty proud of that. It's called the Office of Childhood. That's something we did in 2021. So it's been a couple of years now. So that I think we've seen a lot of positive impacts of that, of all of those staff members and programs and services being unified under one mission, one vision for early childhood, and making sure that all of those services are coordinated for families. Also, some more big improvements that we've made in this space is improving the rate that the state pays for subsidized childcare for low-income families. So as we go on, market rates change, and the state, if we don't modify that rate, really falls behind, which minimizes the pool of childcare providers that are willing to take families that are receiving subsidized care from the state. And so we've made a lot of really significant investments to try and boost those rates to allow more providers to be able to afford to take those families. So pretty proud of those investments. And then the other one I wanted to highlight real quickly is some of the regulatory reform and improvements we've made. It's always a delicate balance between making sure that there are important health and safety requirements for child care providers, but we also want to make sure that we aren't putting regulatory burdens in the way that perhaps are unnecessary or overly burdensome. So providing more kind of concierge type services to these providers to make sure handhold through the process, things like this, to hopefully make those license requirements and things a little bit easier to accomplish, while again maintaining safety and health. We were able to do all of this, again, because of the partnership between the department and our office. And again, I kind of go back to just having that shared vision. I don't know if it was just the stars aligning, or if folks kind of saw, the writing on the wall, in the sand, that these things were gaining momentum. But it was just a really nice alignment between not only our two offices, but also with the General Assembly in terms of stakeholder and grassroots support kind of building over time. Which really just gave us an opportunity to jump on that and to use the time that we had to make those really big strides. So I can't thank Commissioner Vandeven enough for her leadership and taking advantage of that opportunity that we got, and hopefully we'll continue to grow on in the future. We want to eventually be able to expand pre-K to all children regardless of income eligibility.
Thanks, Jamie, for sharing. Another important area we both work together to advance this work, both of your offices, and really great to hear about the investments that were made in pre-K expansion and for childcare affordability, and then that governance aspect again of just how do you effectively deliver some of these efforts by opening up that new office of childhood. So great to hear about all those efforts. Commissioner Vandeven, keeping with you and then bridging a little bit to K-12, that intersection between early childhood and K-12, can you talk about the early literacy and science of reading work that has happened in Missouri over the last number of years? What's the support that you've provided to schools and districts and students in this area? And what's been the challenges? How have you worked with some of the preparation programs to make sure that work continues and is implemented?
Yes, I can. But first, if you don't mind, I'd love to just piggyback on that early
Oh, yeah.
learning piece for a second, because again, with knowing who the audience is for this particular event, I I cannot tell you what a game changer it was. We've been talking about the importance of early learning opportunity, high quality early learning at the state board level for probably a decade. And when Governor Parson came in, the very first conversation that I had with him as the commissioner and him as the governor, I'd known him previously, but that was the first formal meeting as in our roles. And he said, I really want to prioritize uh, early learning. And I thought, oh my gosh, I couldn't believe it, because it was the game changer right there. It was the game changer when he put that emphasis and that focus on making sure this was going to happen. And I just was astounded, because it's such a long game strategy. This is not something you get real quick wins on. This is a long game strategy. So I just want to give that shout out back. It was just amazing. And I do believe that we will see the benefits of this 20 years from now. And the governor has been so much, so committed to our state, and talks about investing in our children, is investing in our state and our future. So I just want to give that little echoing component there, that back up what Jamie was just saying there. That truly was the game changer for getting that moving. So you're right. Early literacy ties right into early learning. We always say, if we want to give students our proper finish, we need to make sure they get that proper start, and giving them those foundational reading skills are really key to that. And so what we did was, of course, like a lot of states across the country, I think the majority of states across the country, really dug into understanding what the science of reading was telling us about how kids learn to read, and making sure that we had our teachers appropriately trained in that area. I think that is very key. And but again, not an easy task when there's a lot of other things that are going on. So some key players in that, our educator preparation program leaders had to be at the table, so that they were understanding the changes that needed to be made, and they were partners with us in that work. And we also then wanted to make sure that we could train our existing teachers through the letters training and that work, which has been when we talk to teachers, they're very clear. They do see what the research tells us, that there are certain kids who are going to learn to read no matter how we teach them to read. But if you want all kids, if you're committed to ensuring that all kids are on board, there are certain strategies that just really work for those kids who need the additional assistance. So the letters training has helped provide that. I will say that when we also got legislative support that ended up being very, very helpful. We had Senate Bill 681 that was passed 2 years ago, that did help us give a little bit more authority to different assessments that were being administered earlier in the child's so we really focus on grade 2, although we have a K-3 assessment. If we want to make sure kids are on track and reading by grade 3, if we don't wait to assess them at a statewide level until grade 3, we feel that's a little bit too late. So giving us those earlier components, and again, not for accountability. I want to be clear on that. Those assessments are not designed for accountability. Those assessments are designed to be able to provide students the appropriate interventions early. So early identification, tested intervention, We also have been able to provide reimbursement for instructional materials. Again, we're a local control state. I think I understand that almost every state says they're a local control state, but we are a local control state. But we can be very clear about instructional materials when we're able to have the funding to reimburse for which instructional materials are being utilized. And I'll just say on both of those parts, I think part of the question, what were some of the challenges in doing that? That is a pretty, you have to stay very focused on and kind of firm on what it is that you're expecting to see in those materials. So we were very clear on the 5 components of the science of reading, and the materials needed to align to that. The assessments need to align to that. And our districts, we have 556 LEAs across the state, needed to kind of conform to that. So that was a little bit of a different approach than we had seen in the past. And I really feel like it's working because we got the leadership at the district level to also see and understand that it's just the right thing to do. When the science is so clear, when all of us are working together and they're starting to see those immediate results, it's the right thing to do for our students. And just been really happy to be able to usher that work through. I will also thank the governor's office for helping us get 2 people who were dedicated specifically to literacy efforts. We know we don't want large government, and we understand that. But these were very committed leaders who want to focus on the literacy efforts, and that's needed if you're going to implement something like that statewide.
Thanks, Commissioner. Really helpful for how you were able to implement these programs over time. So preparation, professional learning, the early interventions and identification, high quality instructional materials, and then again, not to be overlooked, sort of how do you provide from the state capacity to help districts during this time as you're making these transitions by having some dedicated folks to be able to help to provide that support. Thanks so much for sharing about that. I do want to take a moment and just talk about the pandemic a little bit. We're going into the 4th school year since the disruption. We're in post-pandemic, but how did you work together during the pandemic? It was such an evolving time. What did you see sort of the lessons learned from that time period, and where do you still see some challenges in Missouri for additional student support? Jamie, why don't we start with you?
Well, unfortunately, this is an area that while I was with the office, my predecessor was a bit more involved in. So I think I'll defer to Commissioner Vandeven for a majority of the question. But I do want to highlight our office convened the cabinet, which included Commissioner Vandeven, on a daily basis during the pandemic, which I think was really integral to making sure that we weren't stuck in the silos of, our particular agencies, but saw kind of at a bigger level what was going on during the pandemic and was able to tap into the resources of other agencies, which I know in talking to Commissioner Vandeven, her department really benefited from, and others were able to benefit from their perspective as well. So I think using the governor's office as a convener it was really a lesson learned for future, hopefully we don't have to deal with pandemics, but those types of events.
Thanks, Jamie. Commissioner?
Yeah, I'm going to echo that. And I never really love to talk about the pandemic. It makes my neck hurt a little bit. I mean, I'm not going to minimize that. That was very, I think those were challenging times for anyone in leadership anywhere. Okay. But at the state level, we felt it significantly. And again, I am so grateful to this cabinet. When Jamie says every day, 7 days a week, we were getting on calls with this focus. How do we best serve the citizens of the state of Missouri? And that was set out from the start with the governor. And I just sort of reflect back on where I was at that time. And, I remembered my grandparents talking about their World War II or the Depression or different. And I thought, you know what, when we're through this, 10 years from now, we're going to look back and say, how did we respond to really our pressing time? And I'm just going to say I'm very proud of our cabinet because what Jamie outlined there, the governor pulled us together and made it, put the North Star out there. We're going to do whatever we can to serve the citizens well. And, if not us, then who? You just had to keep coming back to that. And when times are kind of tough like that, you have to make decision after decision after decision without a lot of playbooks out there. We relied on each other heavily, which is why we met every day to talk about circumstances across the state and then who could help out where. So when I'm talking about education, I mean, got to know the National Guard really well because they were helping us deliver food. We got to know the health department extremely well because the education and the health department worked together on so many issues during that time. I got to know the Department of Mental Health very well because we did a lot of work with mental health, public safety. I mean, the whole list goes on and on and on of, I shouldn't even name cabinet members because we all just played such a key role in doing that work. So the lessons learned for me are certainly build those relationships before the crisis because we had the relationships. The cabinet had already been meeting and we had an area to do that. Identify your North Star. What is it that you're going to do? Know who's going to be responsible for making some of the decisions because there are many to be made and you don't want to be deciding who's going to be deciding. There's a lot of that needs to take place at the time. And so, for us at the Department of Education, we certainly focused primarily on making sure we could keep our citizens safe and continue to educate them and continue to feed our kids. Those were some of the priority areas. Where do I still see some of the struggle? I think one of the areas that we probably as a nation really need to come together and address is that of attendance and what should that look like. So we're hearing a lot across the nation about chronic absenteeism and how do we address some of those issues post-pandemic because the ramifications will continue to linger if that is not addressed effectively. And so some of what will happen is looking at seat time just a little bit differently and how are we altering educational opportunities for students. I'm not saying, we have to go back to exactly the way things were. But when we talk about chronic absenteeism being an issue, we're certainly hearing that in the workforce as well. So how do we deal with those big issues? Certainly have been made great strides in understanding the digital divide and how to make sure all students have we've been continuing to invest in those areas to make sure students have access when they need it. We're hearing more and more about the importance of using technology appropriately. And so what is a healthy use of technology and what is not, like really working together on some of those big issues.
Thanks, Commissioner. And I've seen this theme of sort of clear communication that you have had between the governor's office and the commissioner. And, I think that, like you said, that foundational piece before the pandemic seems to have really helped during it as well. And thank you for flagging around big issue that we're hearing bipartisanly around chronic absenteeism and attendance and the use of technology, especially with some of the AI, the generative AI that's come on board. How do we make sure that's part but used effectively and safely? As we sort of near the end of this webinar, I wanted to just have a reflective question, and Jamie, I'll go first to you as near the end of the governor's term this fall. What education accomplishments, ones that we've talked about or otherwise, are you most proud of the governor's efforts?
I feel bad because we have already spent a bit of time, and I'm sure you could have told by the way I was speaking that I was already excited about it. So it was a little bit of a, teaser. But I think pre-K expansion is definitely what I'm most proud of for our administration accomplishing in lockstep with the department. A close second is teacher pay and making improvements there. And I'll say for both, I'm really hopeful that the state isn't done yet. But I think we made a really nice stride.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, down payments on two really important pieces of pre-K expansion and and teacher pay. And as the commissioner was saying, it's once you're making that investment, the long-term effects are felt for many years. So thanks for sharing that, Commissioner.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo that I'm really excited about both of those initiatives as well. And I shouldn't call them initiatives because I think they're foundational. And as you just summarized that so well, Seth, I think we're going to see this play out and continue to build upon the work that we've done here, laid the foundation. We are making the transition with a new commissioner coming in, and really happy about the transition and the selection that's there. I know these are two areas that she is very invested in as well. And so just looking forward to see how that continues to develop over time.
Well, thank you both. And, just one last question is just, what do you wish you knew coming into the role? You've been both in your roles for multiple years now. And so for, governor's offices out there, state leaders, what would you wish you had known that you would want to pass on as some advice? Jamie, I'll go first to you.
Well, the advice that comes to mind, please don't get me wrong, this isn't something that we failed to do, but I wish I would have realized the potential ahead of time, so I could have even further maximized on it. But I think just realizing that, you're on the same team and to really leverage each other's strengths and the opportunities that we have in our respective offices, kind of maximize that opportunity. Whatever we do together or conversely fail to do affects generations of students in our state. And that's such a big weight. I'm really proud of what we were able to do. But I think if I were talking to, an earlier version of myself, that I would have really taken that more to heart and even tried to, go even further than we were able to go. Yeah, and that's what comes to mind for me.
Thanks, Jamie. Commissioner?
Yeah, so 19 years ago when I came into this office, I don't think I'm not into this office, but came into the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. I don't think I knew what a gift public service really is. I have thoroughly enjoyed and benefited from the public service that I've been able to participate in, and it has been the opportunity of a lifetime, without a doubt. And I'm going to say that with this next statement that I was at, this was again a national meeting, so this wasn't specific to Missouri, but somebody said, any advice for people going into public service? And they said, go in with eyes open and armor on. And I thought, gosh, that's really telling, right? That today we need to go into these roles with our eyes wide open and armor on. And yet we need really good people to go into public service because it's such an opportunity and people need us. I mean, they just genuinely do need people to go into public service. So how do you get the great people with this concept that you need to go in with eyes wide open and armor on? And what I would share in my final reflection here is that, again, from Governor Parson, he took care of his people. He just really did. At a time when we were taking a lot of arrows, at a time when, he had to share with us the story of the arena on multiple occasions because it's just, you're in the public eye and people come after people like me and it just happens. And so he just, the loyalty that you can show and that you're thinking of your cabinet members as people cannot be understated or overstated, got that backwards. But anyway, and I'm just going to tell a really quick story. I had a pretty significant health scare last year, fine now, but it was pretty significant. And on my first day back to the office, I was walking in to work and I saw Governor Parson across the street, saw his security detail, and I was like waving at them that I was going back, and I said, tap the governor. So they tapped the governor. He waved. He stopped in his tracks. He turned around, came to a crosswalk. His security guys were like, oh my gosh, here we go again, and he walks over and he just gives me a hug and says, I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad you're back. I mean, that's what I'll remember for Governor Parson, right? All the millions of things that we have been through in the past several years. That's the thing I will remember because it is about the people and it is about building the relationships. And we can do anything in these roles if you know somebody's watching out for you a little bit. So that would be my parting reflection is take care of each other, and that we do need good people to go into public service.
Thanks so much, and what a great way to end. Take care of each other, and you're really speaking to the power of relationships, which we know is so important in education
Yes.
as well. And both of you really speaking to the importance and impact that you've made in your roles. So thank you both for your service and leadership, and for such a great conversation and sharing your insights and expertise with our viewers today. So, viewers, again, please note all reports, all resources, all the background materials that Missouri has been advancing over the last number of years will be included attached to the webinar and once it's released on the NGA website. So thank you again, Jamie, Commissioner, and until next time, thanks for all of you for tuning in and have a great day.